I'ma go blow me a check, blow me a check. I think I'm about to blow me a check.
What's good, everybody? What's good? It's your boy, Cardinal Bud Crawford. Alright, y'all. So, today's topic is we're talking about the king of leftovers.
Money right now, I ain't fucking with leftovers. No leftovers.
Terence Bud Crawford. He's 100% confident he beats Errol Spence Jr. next. Alright, y'all. So what do I mean by the king of leftovers? Why is Terence Bud Crawford the king of leftovers? Okay, let me explain this. So I've had quite a few conversations on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram. Go follow me on all platforms, Cardinal Red, on everything. So, you know, what people seem to keep bringing up about Terence Crawford is he beat Shawn Porter, he beat Kell Brook, and he beat a guy who was the other one. I can't even remember who the other one was. But he beat I think it was American. So, but everybody hangs their hat on the fact that he beat Porter worse than Errol Spence did, and that he destroyed American. He knocked that he knocked Kell Brook. You know, that he basically knocked the two guys out or three guys out that Errol Spence just beat. And I keep trying to explain to people that it really doesn't matter what he did after Errol Spence took those guys' belts, because Errol Spence beat them as champions, and they were actually holding titles at the time, which means they were ranked higher than they were when Terence Crawford beat them. They were tougher fighters at the moment because they were sitting champions. They actually held title belts, where when Terence Crawford fought them, they weren't sitting champions. They were not holding title belts. And as a matter of fact, Shawn Porter had been out of boxing for almost 2 years, I believe, maybe even longer than that, before he fought Terence Crawford. And if you go back and watch the video that I made about that fight, I told you guys that there was no way Shawn Porter was going to beat him because he had been off from the sport for so long. There was no way he could probably beat Terence Crawford by being that inactive in a boxing ring. And that he would probably retire after that fight. And this is exactly how it played out. Now, you know, why do I call him the king of leftovers? Because it's like this. When somebody beats you as an active champion or as a sitting champion, that means something. Not only does it mean that he's gained a belt from defeating you, but it means, like I said earlier, he caught you at your best. He beat you at your best. When you are a champion, he beat you at your best. It's like when people say, well, Pacquiao got lucky versus Keith Thurman. Pacquiao didn't get lucky versus Keith Thurman. He beat a sitting champion, someone who was holding a title belt, someone who was considered at their best at the moment, who a lot of people had ranked him above Terence Crawford at that time. A lot of people had said he was going to beat Terence Crawford and Errol Spence at that time. You know, and that's the biggest difference between that's the biggest difference that I see between Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. is that Errol Spence Jr. is actually beating champions, and Terence Crawford is beating the leftovers of those champions. And you know that I'm not trying to diminish what Terence Crawford has done. I'm trying to make it seem like Terence Crawford is not a decent fighter. But if Terence Crawford wants to be praised as high as Errol Spence is being praised, Errol Spence deserves the accolades that he's receiving. Even though I still feel like he ducked Manny Pacquiao, and I think both of those guys ducked Manny Pacquiao, and I think Pacquiao was a risky fight for both of those guys, and I think both of those guys were afraid of being done, like similar to what happened to Keith Thurman if they were to face off with Pacquiao. I still feel like at the moment Errol Spence is the better of those two fighters based on when he got the victories, the fact that he was fighting active seeding champions, and the fact that he did it first. You know, that you have to give him some credit for that. And that doesn't mean you can't like Terence Crawford, or you can't think Terence Crawford's a decent fighter. But let's keep it real. Terence Crawford is the king of leftovers. Terence Crawford only has one welterweight title belt that he got from Jeff Horn, they had to rob Manny Pacquiao to get him to be a champion. If they would have never robbed Manny Pacquiao, Terence Crawford would not be a champion now. He would still be a Mikey Garcia of the welterweight world, no matter what he did in all those other weight classes. Look at Mikey Garcia. Mikey Garcia accomplished a lot in other weight classes, but when he got to welterweight, he's pretty much been stalled out because he doesn't belong there. He doesn't belong there. Now, Terence Crawford's a little different because Terence Crawford was being built up by Bob Arum to be the next welterweight cash cow for Top Rank. And I think this is where the problem comes in. Is that, you know, Bob Arum basically stripped Pacquiao of the title, gave it to Horn, and Crawford beat Horn. And people actually think that Jeff Horn win is a big win. I don't understand it. You know, I don't get it. You know, I get it from the standpoint of Bob Arum set all this crap up, and Bob Arum put Crawford in position to look good, and he put him in a situation where he was trying to build a next welterweight star for himself. Unfortunately, in the process of that, I think he even realized, like, you know what, this guy is not exactly what I thought he was going to be. I can't make the fights with him that I want to make. Whether that was his fault that he couldn't get the fights for Crawford that he wanted to make, or if it was a result of PBC not wanting to deal with Bob Arum. You know, either way, Terence Crawford, the build-up of what Terence Crawford was supposed to be, the hype of Terence Crawford, is actually bigger than what Terence Crawford has accomplished as a welterweight. You can't sit up here and tell me that him beating a 2-year laid-off Shawn Porter is impressive. You can't tell me that's more impressive than Errol Spence beating an active Ugas. You can't tell me that that's more impressive than Errol Spence beating a title-holding Shawn Porter. You can't tell me that that's more impressive than Errol Spence beating what was built up to be the best Kell Brook of that time. If Kell Brook would not have gotten to the ring with, who did he get in the ring with? Was it Triple G or Canelo? Whoever he got into, and they messed his eye all up, Kell Brook would have probably still be in the runnings for some of those titles if it wasn't for that incident. And you can't tell me that Errol Spence beating these guys as active champions is less of an accomplishment than what Terence Crawford, Errol Spence's accolades and his accomplishments as a welterweight far supersede anything that Terence Crawford has done as a welterweight. And once again, Bob Arum was building Crawford up to be something. He was building Crawford up to be something. And unfortunately, Crawford didn't pan out. Even Bob Arum had to realize, like, hey, I'm blowing a lot of money on this guy. He's not selling very well. People are not as into him as I thought they would be. And the fact of the matter is, he really ain't fought nobody at welterweight worth even mentioning at this point. You know, the guys that he has beat, good fights, decent fights, but they're not they weren't the best fights that could have been made for Terence Crawford at that moment. The best fight that could have been made since Terence Crawford has gotten to welterweight up until now would have either been a Thurman fight when he still had the super title, a Pacquiao fight when they were both on top rank, or an Errol Spence Jr. fight. That's it. You know, the rest of these fights, they really don't mean anything because Terence Crawford is not fighting those guys as champions. If he was fighting some other active champions, I would give him a lot more credit than I do Errol Spence. But because Errol Spence is fighting active champions and beating those guys, even though, like I said, I still think he ducked, give him all the credit. And I got to say that he is the big fish. And Terence Crawford is the king of leftovers. And Terence Crawford is the king of leftovers. No matter how you want to slice it, no matter how you want to put it, I don't care if you get mad, I don't care if you're a Crawford fan. Crawford can still accomplish, you know, welterweight greatness if he was to get into the ring and beat Errol Spence. But he has to show and prove that he can get in the ring and beat Errol Spence. He can't continue to make excuses for why he doesn't want to fight somebody. Oh, it's a 60-40 split. Oh, it's a venue thing. Oh, it's this, it's that, and the third. You know, make it happen, show and prove. People will give you your credit. Now, there is another fight that Terence Crawford could take out there that I think would prove to a lot of people how good he is. If they can't, like, you know, the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight, you know, if they still can't get this thing done before the end of the year, which I don't think they will, but, you know, I'm still optimistic. You know, Terence Crawford needs to be pursuing Boots Ennis. He needs to get Boots in the ring, he needs to smash his face in, and he needs to prove that Boots is a fluke. That's the best other fight that he can get. Because Boots, I think, can beat both of those guys. And I think Boots is putting a lot of doubt in a lot of people's mind that either one of those guys, Errol Spence or Terence Crawford, is the best welterweight. You know, and there's an argument to be made there. But because Errol Spence does have 3 titles out of the 4, you got to give the man his credit. Give Errol Spence his credit for doing what he said he was going to do. You know, I think it's kind of sad that people don't even want to do that, and it's only coming from Crawford fans who don't want to see it for what it really is. You know, if you really want to prove something, you can't, and you know, then you can't get Errol Spence in the ring this year. You need to get Boots in the ring this year. A Thurman fight wouldn't mean anything at this point, you know, because simply put, you need to be fighting the best guys out there. And if you can't get active champions, because there's only one other active welterweight champion at the moment, Errol Spence Jr., you need to go get the next best thing, which is Boots Ennis. Let me know what y'all think about that down in the comment section, man. I don't want to ramble on too long. Is Terence Crawford the king of leftovers? Or do you respect, you know, his victories versus Shawn Porter, you know, Kell Brook, and Amir Khan, even though they were not seeded champions? They were not active champions when he fought them. Let me know what y'all think. Hit that like button for me. Subscribe, all that good stuff. Oh, we coming with some more content, so stay tuned, baby. You hear me? And it's your boy, and we are out of here.
Came with that sack with it. I've been busting blocks with your bitch, and this 600 sipping that getting. Now, hold up.